If you'll notice that thing there says on the side of the neck, in the armpit, around the groin. Well, why is that? I mean, lymph nodes are here. They're everywhere in here, but you can't see them, you can't feel them. So if you're going to find it, you're going to have a swelling here or a swelling here, or you're going to have a sore place under your arm, and you'll reach under there and it feels like there's an egg or a golf ball under your arm, or you'll have a swollen place in your groin. That's the only place that lymph nodes are big enough to kind of come to your attention when you're shaving. Those symptoms that are down below the second side there, that means that kind of Hodgkin's is a bit more of a aggressive thing. Night sweats, fever, significant weight loss greater than 10% of your body weight, cough, shortness of breath, or chest pain means you probably got fluid in your chest. So any group of, let's show that next thing there, that's the stages with the lymph node diagram. So if you look at that, is that, you got it up? All right, you see 3 body types there. One of them has these lymph nodes in the neck. The other one has the lymph nodes in the neck. Now you can't see or feel those ones that are underneath the breastbone there. So stage 1 is Hodgkin's disease in one location. 2 is 2 locations on the same side of the diaphragm. And stage 3 is anything that's above and below the diaphragm. Well, once you get past stage 1, you've sort of put all of Hodgkin's disease now into the area where you treat it with chemotherapy. And almost much of the stage 1 Hodgkin's disease, if it's associated with anything below that line, meaning fever or night sweats, instead of the old treatment, which would be to radiate this, you treat with chemotherapy. So go to that next, go to this one here, the one that's got the 2 little things in it. If you look at this, nobody will be able to read it, but it starts down here at birth and goes up here to 80 years of age. And you'll notice this looks like a stock market graph, but there's 2 big old peaks in here. So that first peak begins at about age 15 to 20, and it sort of drops down at about age 30. And then the higher peak begins in about age 60 and then just continues to rise almost for the rest of your life. So Hodgkin's disease has a biphasic age thing to it. These young adults that are in this age group of late teens up into their 30s can be very aggressively treated, placed into remission, an extremely high proportion of the time. You got that, put that next slide up, and we're going to leave that one up for a while. This next one is the survival statistics of the various age groups of people who get Hodgkin's disease, and that's 100% at the top. Well, that's pretty doggone encouraging, and that's all stages lumped together. So if you look at this one on the left-hand side there, BKP, the men is one side and women's the other. The difference is infinitesimal, and it's above 95%. So, and this was 90%. So this is really the bulk of the Hodgkin's disease down there. It used to be Hodgkin's disease, you just, you went out and you bought yourself a plot of ground and you got the lawyer together and you did yourself a will, and you 6 months, a year, or 2 years out, you were gone. The patients that I see today with Hodgkin's disease, we have that kind of success in getting them into a remission. If you look at down here, the survivals of the people at the other end, where it says that the last 3 are people below 60 to 70, 70, 80, and 80 to 100. Is not quite as good, but that's survival. And most of those people were dying off from heart disease and lung disease and something else, not from Hodgkin's disease. So that's all-cause mortality there. Well, anyway, so at the end of the day, the patients that we see today with Hodgkin's disease, even if they show up with weight loss and fever and all that sort of stuff, are placed into remission with aggressive therapy. They generally stay in remission and don't relapse. I've got a young man that everybody in the mountains up here knows, looks like he should play football for the Falcons, who relapsed at about 3 years, had a bone marrow transplant. did well for another 3 years, relapsed, had a second bone marrow transplant, relapsed again, did well for about 3 years, and for the last 4 years has been on those drugs like we talk about here that are called PD-1 inhibitors, and that's the Jimmy Carter drug, and he's in a complete remission. If you stop and add all that together, that's 14 years this guy's been under sort of chronic treatment for Hodgkin's disease. So basically, the idea that there are several different kinds, lymphocyte-predominant Hodgkin's disease used to have a better survival than the nodular sclerosing or the mixed, as they were talking about there, or classical Hodgkin's disease. But those survival differences weren't very much. And the big thing about survival today is the age at diagnosis and whether or not they get into aggressive therapy. And basically anywhere in the country today, regardless of whether they have insurance or not, nobody with Hodgkin's disease is not treated appropriately and in a big cancer center like Emory or like us, even if they have no insurance. So when we see people today with Hodgkin's disease, and they can be undocumented, they can be anything, they will get the most aggressive modern treatment just like you would get, and their outlooks are good. So that's enough for me. The differences in Hodgkin's disease are negligible. The outlook is very good today, and it used to be terrible. So that's enough of that one.
All right, thank you. And again, we want to thank Georgia Cancer Research Center, affiliated with Northside Hospital, for this segment. Last night, my 4-year-old had a stuffy nose around bedtime. I gave him a dose of children's allergy medicine. About an hour later, he was not sleeping comfortable and couldn't breathe through his nose, hardly at all. He has super sensitive skin, so I didn't want to use vapor rub on his skin. Is there anything else I could do to help relieve his stuffy nose the next time?
Let's see that. Let's see that picture of that 4-year-old boy there. Okay. Well, first of all, don't put vapor rub on a kid. It's awful. It's not, vapor rub is not good for grown-ups. So let's just keep vapor rub out of it.
I have to thank you, because there's a person I know, I don't want to bring no names up. They try to vapor rub me every time I turn around. So you just, thank you. Good. Go on.
Vapor rub is worthless. Don't use vapor rub. Now, some people, I hate to tell you, but in some occupations where you are around foul and unpleasant odor, like sewers or whatever, things like that sort. Huh? Yeah, people will take a little vapor rub and put it on the upper lip so that they don't get the overwhelming, rotten meat, if that was a place that's bad, or particularly people, plumbers that work in plugged up sewers and stuff like that. In England and in France, perfume, remember what perfume was for? Perfume was to overcome the odors in the castle when nobody bathed except once a year or not at all, and didn't have toilets. So anyway, we're not going to use vapor rub on this poor 5-year-old kid or 4-year-old kid. Second, the most ineffective way to treat this boy you're looking at here is a chronic allergy kid, and they're acting like this nasal congestion thing is a one-time shot. Hadn't happened before. I don't know why it happened. We haven't worked it out. We haven't been to see Dr. Tidman or anybody else and pronounce it as allergy. But this time of year, show that second one. This time of year, which we're going to have to say is late summer, early fall, you look at the number of allergens that are there, it'll gag a maggot. So this time of year, between dust mites and what's that stuff that just popped up, the ragweed, and the other one, goldenrod just popped up, we're going to make this assumption. This question was asked this week. That kid's got allergic to something. This is exactly the right age for the onset of allergies. It's not, if it just happened one night, just wait, it's going to happen again. If that child has moderately severe allergies diagnosed by a physician that Now, I want you to listen to this, Amanda, because you got 3 kids, and we've discussed this before, and it lasts long enough to become a problem so that you've got them. The most effective treatment is the nasal glucocorticoid nasal sprays that you can purchase now over the counter, like Flonase. And the recommendations of the experts are, if the Flonase says maximum dose for age 6 and under is X, use the maximum dose. Start with a maximum dose for a week, and then if it works, you start cutting back the dose. Most commonly, when people buy that, they say, well, I'm going to start with a little bit, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to raise the dose. So what I'm trying to encourage you to do is use the maximum dose when you start. When it works, back off of it. The second most common thing that will help children or adults is the oral non-sedating antihistamines. We talk about that all the time. They're all over the counter now, Claritin, Allegra, and Zyrtec. And then the other things, antihistamine nasal sprays, and you get a lot more complicated. You've gotten beyond the point where you ought to be treating this kid at home, and your local doc is going to do that kid a great service over the course of his life. Once this has been diagnosed as chronic and moderately severe or worse, refer the kid to the allergist while he's this age, because appropriate allergy treatment with the allergies, hate to say allergy shots, but the allergy shots or whatever, will dramatically lower the chance that that child over a lifetime will get troublesome asthma or troublesome chronic lung disease or be liable for frequent pulmonary infections. And it's worth taking that step while the kid is in his first year or 2 of the allergies. So back to the original question, no vapor rub. The stuff you gave him, the decongestant, is not going to do any good. If you think it's a 1 or 2 times thing and you've got some of that, what do you call that, saline nasal stuff, use that. If this becomes a chronic problem over the next several weeks, take him to your doctor. Let him start you on the right stuff first, which is the steroid nasal sprays, and then the non-sedating antihistamine second. And tell the doctor right off the bat, if this is moderately severe in your estimation and is troublesome for longer than several months, refer my son to an allergist. Excuse me, is that a son or daughter? 4-year-old, didn't say. Refer the 4-year-old to an allergist. Is that good enough, Amanda, to get it answered for you?
Okay, one of our all-star panel is backing in now, and that's always our indicator that we probably should start.
Which means that I had to get
and we sit
I
here,
had to shake them and get them a cup of coffee and everything to get them out of bed this morning.
Well, exactly. All right, Dr. Whaley, we appreciate you very much, but what are we closing with?
Well, what we're doing is talking about medical news again. You know, we sometimes talk about medical news when we laugh. Big food recall this past week is ground beef causing E. coli and death, and that's the real common thing that tells you when you buy a hamburger out somewhere, even though you like it medium rare, unless you're real confident where you are, you want it cooked at medium or better so that it got hot in the middle and killed the E. coli. But that's a huge recall this week. And then there's another recall on the Cheerios and all the rest. But I think I mentioned this 2 or 3 weeks ago, that every decade since the end of the Spanish-American War, the life expectancy of Americans has risen. It's risen, first of all, because of antibiotics and then better treatment of disease. And it officially has fallen in the last 2 years. And so we'll ask Rick, why has the life expectancy of the average American fallen in the last 2 years when we have better medical care, we got better flu shots, and we got the shingles shot? And the answer is, Amanda, what's the answer? The opioid epidemic.
Yes.
And the number of deaths being caused by the opioid epidemic is big enough. Now you have to think about how big that really has to be to statistically lower the life expectancy of a whole nation. So that's number one. That's why I want everybody at that thing that's going to be on October the 4th, because they're going to be talking there about vaping and stuff, but it leads you, if you've got kids, into behavioral keys that may keep them out of being an opioid victim in the future. The last thing I've always like to harp on is the exercise. And there was a huge study from Sweden. I always liked Sweden. Came out yesterday. I've always said 5 hours of walking a week will diminish your chances of death from heart disease. Well, the Swedes focused on stroke. And they said 4 hours of walking a week diminished by 60% your chances of having a stroke. And if just one more time, it adds to the walk an hour a day, BKP. How many times? 5 days a week. If you want to get heart disease. If you don't mind having heart disease, but you want to protect yourself from stroke only, you could walk 4 days a week.
Okay. Stroke 4, heart disease 5.
Yeah, stroke 4, heart disease 5. All right.
Dr. Whaley, we thank you very much. We also want to say thank you to Georgia Cancer Research Center, affiliated with Northside Hospital, for this segment. You can find these segments on our YouTube channel, Fetch Your News, FYN TV. You can find them there. Also, if you would like to ask the doc a question, you send that to info, I-N-F-O, at fetchyournews.com, and we'll get the question to Dr. Whaley. Thank you very much. And up next, the All-Star Political Panel. As usual, they probably don't have anything to talk about, but we'll try to figure out something.
They're not going to talk about sexual things in Kavanaugh, are they?
No, absolutely not.
Are they going to talk about Iraq and the
I don't allow any of that on the All-Star
They're
Panel.
not going to talk about Sadr versus the Kurds or anything like that? Okay.
No, nothing like that.
Okay.
All-Star Political Panel as soon as we return. Take us a break, Amanda.